Millionaire's son brings homeless woman home, but father's reaction shocks everyone. Michael Henderson watched through the bulletproof window of his Lexus as the rain lashed the streets of New York. The 22-year-old was returning from his military academy graduation when he spotted a figure collapsed on the waterlogged sidewalk. His first instinct was to speed up and drive past, as he always did, but something made him stop. That's when he saw it was a woman. She lay motionless, her blonde hair plastered to her pale face, wearing tattered clothes that barely shielded her from the storm. Michael stepped out of the car and approached, feeling the icy rain seep into his immaculate military uniform. The woman was unconscious but breathing. Without thinking of the consequences, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the vehicle. During the drive to his family's mansion in the Upper East Side, she muttered unintelligible words as if trapped in a nightmare. The estate gate swung open automatically as the car approached. The three-story mansion stood imposingly amid perfectly manicured gardens. Michael parked in the garage and carried the woman through the back entrance, hoping to avoid the curious stares of the staff. But Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper who had worked there for 40 years, appeared in the kitchen just as he walked in. "My heavens, Michael, what is this?" she exclaimed, nearly dropping the tray she was holding. "She passed out on the street. I couldn't leave her there," the young man replied, feeling the woman's weight in his arms. "Your father will have a fit when he finds out. You know how he feels about strangers." Michael ignored the warning and carried her upstairs to the guest room. The woman was lighter than she looked, as if years on the streets had worn her down. He laid her carefully on the bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. Then her eyes fluttered open. They were a piercing blue, almost crystalline, but held a deep sadness that seemed to come from a distant place. She glanced around, confused, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Where am I?" she murmured hoarsely. "You're safe," Michael replied, keeping a respectful distance. "You fainted in the rain. I brought you home." The woman tried to sit up, but her strength failed her. Her gaze swept over the luxurious room with a strange expression, as if the place felt vaguely familiar. "I can't stay here. I need to go." "In this storm? Absolutely not. At least wait until morning." Just then, loud voices echoed down the hallway. Michael immediately recognized the commanding tone of Richard Henderson, his father. The businessman had returned from his trip earlier than expected. "Where's my son?" he bellowed from downstairs. "Mrs. Wilson said he brought someone home." Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Michael instinctively positioned himself between the door and the bed, shielding the woman. When Richard flung the door open, his face was red with fury. "Michael, what is this nonsense? How dare you bring a beggar into our home without my permission?" But his words died in his throat as his eyes locked onto the woman in the bed. The 55-year-old businessman froze as if he'd been punched in the gut. His expression shifted from rage to something close to terror. "Emily," he whispered, barely audible. The woman stared back without recognition, but Richard remained paralyzed, his eyes wide as if he'd seen a ghost. "Dad, do you know her?" Michael asked, bewildered, but Richard didn't answer. He remained motionless for long seconds before partially composing himself. "Everyone out. Now," he ordered with a trembling voice. "Dad, I was just trying to help." "Get out," shouted the businessman, a vein throbbing on his forehead. Michael hesitated, looking at the woman who watched the scene with a frightened expression. Reluctantly, he left the room, closing the door behind him. From the hallway, he could still hear his father's voice, now low and shaky. "Emily, is it really you?" Michael went downstairs with his mind in turmoil. In the kitchen, he found Mrs. Wilson nervous, unnecessarily stirring pots. "Mrs. Wilson, did you hear what my father said? He called her Emily." The housekeeper stopped stirring the soup and turned slowly. Her brown eyes carried an old sadness. "That name, it's been a long time since I've heard that name in this house." "You knew her?" Mrs. Wilson hesitated, glancing toward the stairs as if afraid of being overheard. "Perhaps your father should explain this to you." "Mrs. Wilson, please. I've never seen my father like that." The housekeeper sighed heavily and sat in the chair beside the solid wood table. Emily was your father's first wife, Michael. The young man felt the floor shift beneath his feet. First wife? But that's impossible. My mother has always been... Your mother, Catherine, is his second wife. Emily disappeared over 30 years ago, shortly after they married. Disappeared? How? No one ever knew for sure. One day she simply wasn't here anymore. Your father nearly went mad searching for her. Michael had to lean against the counter. His entire life, he had believed his parents met young and married forever. The revelation shook the foundation of everything he thought he knew about his family. Why was I never told? Your father forbade any mention of her name. When he married Mrs. Catherine 5 years later, he made sure the past stayed buried. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs. Richard appeared in the kitchen, his face pale and hands visibly trembling. He looked at his son with desperation. Michael, we need to talk. Dad, Mrs. Wilson told me about Emily. Why did you never tell me you had a wife before Mom? Richard sank heavily into a chair, running his hands through his graying hair. Because it's water under the bridge, son. Emily belonged to a time in my life I tried to forget. But she's here now. How can it be water under the bridge? I don't know if it's really her. It could be 30 years, but the eyes are the same. Mrs. Wilson approached with a cup of coffee, her hands also trembling slightly. Mr. Richard, if she really is Emily, if it's her, the businessman interrupted, I need to understand what happened all these years, where she's been, why she disappeared like that. Dad, she didn't seem to recognize you. Richard nodded gravely. That's what worries me most. The Emily I knew would never pretend not to recognize me. The sound of footsteps upstairs interrupted them. Michael looked at the ceiling, concerned. She might be trying to leave. I'll go up, said Richard, standing abruptly. Dad, let me go first. She trusts me. The businessman hesitated but finally agreed. Michael took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. He found the bedroom door ajar and peeked inside. The woman sat on the edge of the bed, examining her own hands as if they were foreign to her. When Michael entered, she lifted her blue eyes, which now seemed even more lost. Are you feeling better? He asked gently. I don't know if I'm better or worse, she replied with unsettling honesty. Your house feels familiar, but I can't remember why. You don't remember my father. Should I? He seemed to know me, but... She brought her hand to her forehead as if suffering from a headache. I can barely remember anything. I only know my name is Emily. Emily what? Just Emily, that's all I know about myself. Michael sat in the armchair across from the bed, keeping his distance to avoid startling her. How long has it been since you had a home? Years. Many years. I wake up every day hoping the memories will return, but they never do. And how do you survive? Emily gave a sad smile. Through the kindness of strangers, like yours today. At that moment, Richard appeared in the doorway. Emily visibly stiffened upon seeing him. May I come in? He asked with a gentleness Michael rarely saw in his father. Emily nodded hesitantly. Richard entered and sat in the other armchair, clasping his hands to hide their trembling. Emily, do you really not remember me? Should I? We were very close, a long time ago. She studied him carefully, as if trying to force her memory to work. Your face, there's something familiar, but it's like trying to recall a dream after waking up. Richard took a deep breath. Emily, you're my wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily blinked several times, processing the information. That's impossible. Would I be living on the streets if I were married to someone like you? It's a long story, very complicated. Dad, Michael interrupted. Maybe she should rest. She's clearly confused and... No, Emily suddenly exclaimed, startling them both. I need to know. If you have answers about who I am, I need to hear them. Richard looked at his son, then at the woman who had once been the love of his life. All right, but it's a story that may hurt deeply. Pain is something I know well, Emily replied with unexpected firmness. The businessman stood and walked to the window, gazing at the rain-soaked gardens. We met when I was 25, and you were 23, at a charity ball right here in New York. You wore a blue dress that matched your eyes. Emily frowned as if something distant stirred in her mind. Did I dance? Beautifully. It was the first thing I noticed about you. The way you moved, as if floating. Go on. We married 6 months later. My parents were against it from the start. They said you came from a family too simple for the Hendersons. Did that matter to you? Richard turned to face her. At the time, no. I was hopelessly in love. I thought love could conquer any obstacle. But something went wrong. My parents made our lives hell. They cut off my allowance, removed me from the company, spread rumors about you in society. Emily rose from the bed and walked to the other window. Even in her worn clothes, there was a natural elegance in her movements that didn't escape Michael's notice. And then, one morning I woke up and you were gone. Vanished completely. You left only a note saying you couldn't live that way anymore. Do you have that note? Richard hesitated. I do. I want to see it. Emily, maybe it's not. I want to see it, she shouted, startling everyone, including herself. Richard nodded and left the room. Michael stayed with Emily, who now seemed agitated. I don't know why that note bothers me so much, she murmured. How can I react to things I don't remember? Maybe emotional memory is stronger than conscious memory. Emily looked at him with new appreciation. You're wiser than you seem for someone so young. My mother always says I have an old soul. Your mother? Emily fell silent as Richard returned with a yellowed, time-worn envelope. His hands shook as he handed it to her. Emily carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the sheet of paper. As she read the first lines, her face turned drastically pale. This isn't my handwriting, she said, with absolute certainty. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Richard Henderson froze. How can you be sure? Because even without my memory, I know how I write. I've always known. It's one of the few things that stayed with me. She picked up a pen from the bedside table and wrote her name on a blank sheet. The handwriting was completely different from the note. My God, murmured Richard, sinking into the armchair. If you didn't write this, then someone wanted you to believe I left willingly. Michael stepped closer to examine the two papers. The difference is obvious. How did my father not notice it at the time? I was in shock, Richard answered, his voice strained. I couldn't think straight. And my parents insisted this was typical of people like Emily to do something like this. People like me? Emily asked, a note of indignation rising in her voice. People from simpler backgrounds. My parents always believed you were only interested in the family money. Emily sat heavily on the bed. So someone made me disappear and forged this note to cover their tracks. But who and why? Michael asked. Richard was visibly shaken, his hands covering his face. My parents, it had to be them. Are they still alive? My mother is in a nursing home. My father passed away 5 years ago. Emily stood abruptly. I want to talk to your mother. Emily, she has advanced Alzheimer's. She doesn't even recognize me. It doesn't matter. Maybe seeing my face will trigger something in her. This is crazy, Michael protested. You just recovered from fainting in the rain? And I'll keep fainting in the rain if I don't find out who I really am. Richard looked at her with a mix of admiration and sadness. You've always been like this, stubborn beyond reason. So this is something I remember? My personality? Some traits seem unchanged. Emily walked to the door. Let's go now. Now? Emily, it's almost midnight. I won't be able to sleep without answers. Richard stood, looking like he'd aged 10 years in a few hours. All right, but first, I want to show you something. He left the room and returned with an old photo album. Emily opened it with trembling hands. The first photo showed a young Richard dancing with a woman in a blue dress. The woman's face was identical to Emily's, only younger. That's me, she murmured, touching the photo reverently. Our first dance. She turned the pages, revealing dozens of pictures of a clearly passionate couple. Wedding, honeymoon, intimate moments at the mansion. Why did you keep all this? Because I never stopped loving you. even after I remarried. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. His mother, Catherine, had always seemed somewhat distant, but he'd assumed it was just her temperament. Now he was starting to understand that maybe she knew she'd never fully have her husband's heart. Does your current wife know about me? Catherine knows there was someone before her, but we never went into details. And how will she react to me being here? Richard hesitated. Catherine is away on business. She won't be back until next week. Emily closed the album with a sigh. 1 week to uncover 30 lost years. Emily, Michael said gently, do you remember anything about what happened after you disappeared? Anything at all? She closed her eyes, concentrating. I remember waking up in a hospital, a nurse saying I'd been found on a road, injured and without any ID. I didn't even know my name. What kind of injuries? Head trauma. The doctor said it would explain the memory loss. Richard leaned forward. Does that mean someone hurt you on purpose? Or that I had a very convenient accident? My God, murmured Michael. This is very serious. Emily opened her eyes and there was an iron determination in them. That's why I need to talk to your grandmother. She might be the only living person who knows the truth. Richard nodded reluctantly. We'll go at the first visiting hour tomorrow. No, now. Emily, the nursing home doesn't allow visits after... You're Richard Henderson, one of the wealthiest men in New York. I'm sure you can open a few doors even at midnight. Michael looked at his father, hoping he'd refuse, but Richard was already reaching for the phone. Hello, Dr. Parker, it's Richard Henderson. I know it's late, but I need to make an emergency visit to my mother. Yes, I know it's almost midnight. It's a very urgent family matter. Thank you, doctor. We'll be there in an hour. When he hung up, Emily was already heading for the door. Emily, you need to change. You can't go like that. She looked down at her soaked and battered clothes. I don't have anything else. Mrs. Wilson might have something that fits you, suggested Michael. Richard shook his head. Mrs. Wilson is much smaller than Emily, but Catherine might have something. I'm not wearing your current wife's clothes, Emily said firmly. Then we'll buy something on the way. At this hour? I know a few stores that open especially for preferred clients. In less than an hour, Emily was wearing an elegant yet understated outfit, her hair dry and styled. The transformation was striking. Dressed properly, she regained the dignity the years on the streets had tried to steal. In the car on the way to the nursing home, Emily remained silent, staring out the window. Michael, in the back seat, watched the tension between his parents, because now he realized this was it. He was seeing his two parents together for the first time. Emily, Richard said as he drove, there's something I need to tell you before we get there. What? My mother has always been a very controlling person, and when you disappeared, she changed, became more withdrawn, like she was hiding a secret. What kind of secret? I don't know. But Mrs. Wilson once told me my mother burned all your things just days after you vanished. Emily turned to face him. Everything. Clothes, photos that weren't in my office, letters from your family. Everything. That's not the behavior of someone who expected me to return. No, it's not. They arrived at the nursing home at 2 in the morning. Dr. Parker, a man in his 60s who had known the family for decades, greeted them personally. Mrs. Margaret is asleep, but I can wake her. She has moments of clarity, especially in the early hours. Doctor, Emily asked, do you know me? The doctor studied her for a few seconds. Your face is familiar, but I can't place it. I'm Emily, Richard's first wife. Dr. Parker stopped abruptly. That's impossible. Emily Henderson disappeared 30 years ago, and now she's back, said Richard. That's why we need to talk to my mother. The doctor led them through the quiet halls to the room where Margaret Henderson lived. It was a luxurious apartment, but it couldn't mask the distinct smell of medicine and old age. Margaret was awake, sitting in an armchair by the window, looking out at the nursing home's inner garden. At 82, she still held the upright posture that had always defined her. Mother? Richard called softly. Margaret turned slowly. Her eyes, still sharp despite her age, first settled on her son, then on Michael, and finally on Emily. When she saw Emily, Margaret Henderson turned drastically pale and clutched her chest. "No, it can't be. Mother, are you all right?" "Emily," whispered the old lady, her voice trembling. "You came back." "Hello, Margaret," said Emily, approaching slowly. "But how? We thought you—" Margaret stopped abruptly, as if realizing she was revealing more than she should. "Thought I what, Margaret?" The old lady glanced quickly at her son, then at Emily, visibly agitated. You left. You left a note." "What note?" "Saying you didn't love us, that you wanted the money." Emily knelt beside the armchair. "Margaret, look at me. Was that note written by me?" Margaret hesitated, her eyes revealing an inner struggle. I don't... Mom, the handwriting in the note doesn't match Emily's. We compared." Margaret squeezed her eyes shut as if trying to block painful memories. "I can't talk about this." "Why not?" Emily insisted. "Because I promised." "Promised who?" "Your father," murmured Margaret, so softly they could barely hear. Richard stepped closer. "My father. What promise was that?" Margaret opened her eyes and they were filled with tears. "He made me promise never to tell the truth." "What truth, Mom?" "About what we did to Emily." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Margaret's heavy breathing. Emily held the old lady's hands. "Margaret, please, I need to know what happened to me. We didn't want to hurt her, we just wanted her gone." "How?" "Your father hired men. They were only supposed to scare her, make her leave town." Richard sank heavily into a nearby chair. "Mom, what exactly did they do?" "It wasn't to hurt her," Margaret protested, agitated. "Just to take her away, but something went wrong." "What went wrong?" "They said there was an accident, that she hit her head when she tried to escape from the car." Emily instinctively touched the side of her head where an old scar was still visible. "And then?" "They left her at a hospital in Boston. They said she was alive but hurt." "And after that?" "Then we lost contact. The men said she'd regained consciousness and run away from the hospital." Richard buried his face in his hands. "My God, Mom, you practically kidnapped her." "It was just supposed to be a scare," Margaret cried, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Your father was desperate to protect the family." "Protect from what?" Emily asked. "From the scandal. A daughter-in-law who wasn't from our social class. What would people think?" Michael, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You destroyed 2 lives because of social prejudice?" Margaret looked at her grandson as if seeing him for the first time. "You don't understand, boy. Back then, those things mattered. And they still matter to you," Emily said bitterly. "No," Margaret protested. "When I found out you'd really disappeared, that we couldn't find you anymore, I regretted it every day. But not enough to tell Richard the truth. Your father forbade it, said what was done was done." Richard stood abruptly. 30 years, Mum. 30 years I believed Emily had abandoned me. You were young. You managed to rebuild your life." "I never rebuilt my life," he shouted. "I married Catherine out of obligation from social pressure. I never loved anyone the way I loved Emily." Margaret looked at Emily with a pleading expression. "Can you forgive us?" Emily rose slowly, her face impassive. "Margaret, you and your husband stole 30 years of my life. 30 years I spent not knowing who I was, without family, without a home. I know, but there's no but that justifies this." Emily turned toward the door but stopped before leaving. "Is there anything else you haven't told me?" Margaret hesitated again. "Mom," Richard pressed. There was another reason we wanted her to leave." "What?" Emily was pregnant. The world seemed to stop. Emily leaned against the doorframe, her legs giving way. "Pregnant?" 3 months along. You hadn't told Richard yet. Richard looked at Emily, then at his mother, completely shocked. I was going to be a father. What happened to the baby? Asked Emily, her voice trembling. Margaret couldn't answer, just shook her head. Mom, answer me. What happened to my child? The accident, the doctors said. She lost the baby because of the head injuries. Emily slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, sobbing. Richard rushed to hold her, and for the first time in decades they embraced. Emily, forgive me. If I had known... We had a child, she murmured through tears, and I didn't even know. Michael knelt beside them. Dad, does that mean I had a brother? Or sister, replied Richard, also crying. Margaret watched from the armchair, regret etched in every wrinkle of her face. Is there anything else, Grandma? Asked Michael, his voice thick with restrained anger. No, that's all. Are you sure? I am. Emily partially composed herself and looked at Margaret. I want the names of the men your husband hired. They're gone now. One passed away 15 years ago. The other moved to the countryside and we lost touch. Convenient. Emily, you have to believe me. If I could undo... But you can't, Emily interrupted, standing up. And now I have to learn to live with the fact that I lost a child and 30 years because of your arrogance. They left the nursing home in silence. In the car, the atmosphere was heavy as lead. Richard drove mechanically, still processing everything he'd learned. Where are we going now? Asked Michael. Home, replied his father. Whose home? Asked Emily. Richard glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Your home, our home. I haven't had a home in 30 years. Then it's time you had one again. When they reached the mansion, it was past 4 in the morning. Mrs. Wilson waited in the kitchen, clearly worried. How did it go? She asked quietly. We found out the truth, Richard answered grimly. All of it? I think so. Mrs. Wilson looked at Emily with compassion. I'm so sorry, my dear. Did you know? Asked Emily. I suspected. It always seemed strange that you just disappeared like that. And you never said anything? To whom could I say it? Mr. Richard was devastated. Her employers forbade any mention of your name. I was just a maid. Emily nodded understandingly. Mrs. Wilson, could you prepare the blue room for Emily? Richard asked. The blue room? Emily raised an eyebrow. It was your favorite room when we lived here. You said the view of the rose garden calmed you. For a moment, something flickered in Emily's eyes. White roses? You remember? I don't know, but when you mentioned roses, I felt something strange. Mrs. Wilson smiled for the first time since Emily had arrived. She always asked me to cut white roses for the room. Said the scent made her dream of good things. Emily touched her forehead again. It's frustrating, like the memories are locked behind a door I can't open. Maybe with time they'll come back, Michael said hopefully. Or maybe it's better if they don't, Emily replied. Some doors stay locked for a reason. Richard looked at her intently. Emily, I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to know you'll always have a place here. And your wife? How will she react when she comes back and finds me here? I'll explain everything to Catherine when she returns. Is that fair to her? Richard hesitated. Catherine always knew I didn't love her the way I should have. Our marriage was more of a business merger than a romance. Even so, she's been your wife for 20 years. And I was her husband for only 2, but those were the 2 most important years of my life. Emily headed toward the stairs. I need to sleep. My head is pounding. Emily, Richard called out. Thank you for coming back. She stopped on the first step without turning around. I didn't come back, Richard. I was brought back. There's a big difference. Michael walked Emily to the blue bedroom. Mrs. Wilson had prepared everything quickly, including white roses in a vase beside the bed. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you feel anything for my father? Emily sat on the bed, holding one of the roses. Honestly, I don't know. I look at him and see a stranger who claims to have loved me. But my heart doesn't recognize that love. That must be terrible for him. And for me too. Imagine finding out you lost 30 years of your life, a son, and a love everyone says was extraordinary, but not being able to feel any of it. Memories might come back. Or maybe it's better if they don't. Maybe I'm a different person now. Maybe the Emily he loved really did leave that night. Michael sat in the armchair by the window. Can I ask you another question? Go ahead. What was it like living on the streets all those years? Emily smiled sadly. You learn that humans can survive almost anything. You learn kindness exists in the most unexpected places. And you learn dignity doesn't depend on where you sleep. Did you ever try to find your original family? What family? I didn't even know my last name. How could I look for anyone? And now? Will you try to find them? Emily lay on the bed, still dressed. First, I need to decide if I want my old life back or to build a new one. What's the difference? The difference is, the old life comes with expectations. Everyone will expect me to be the Emily from 30 years ago. But I'm not that person anymore. Michael was silent for a moment. Emily, can I tell you something? Of course. My whole life, I felt like something was missing in our family. My parents always seemed distant from each other. Now I understand why. I'm sorry you found out this way. I'm not. I'd rather have the truth, even if it hurts. Emily studied him carefully. You look so much like your father when he was young. You remember him young? Not exactly, but when I look at you, I feel something familiar, like I'm seeing an echo of something I once knew. Is that a good sign? I don't know. I'm still learning the difference between memory and intuition. Michael stood to leave. Emily, whatever you decide about the future, I want you to know I'm glad you're here. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. And they were the tears of someone who finally found what he thought was lost forever. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. After Michael left, Emily was alone in the blue bedroom. The full moon lit up the rose garden through the window. She walked over and opened it, letting the night fragrance of the flowers drift in. For a fleeting moment, she had the sensation she'd done this before, but the memory, if it even was one, faded before she could grasp it. Emily took off her shoes and walked barefoot across the room. The Persian rug was soft under her feet. There was something comforting about the texture, but again, she couldn't quite place why. She sat at the vanity and studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was too thin, with premature wrinkles from years of exposure to the elements. But the eyes were the same ones she saw in the old photographs. "Who are you, really?" she asked the mirror. There was no answer. Meanwhile, downstairs, Richard Henderson remained awake in his office, flipping through the photo album. In each picture, he saw the young, passionate Emily he had lost. The woman who had returned looked the same physically, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Michael appeared at the door. "Dad, you should get some sleep." "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I think about the child we lost." "You didn't know she was pregnant." "But I should have. A husband should notice these things." "You were both so young." Richard closed the album with a sigh. "Michael, do you think Emily will ever forgive me?" "I think she needs to forgive herself first." "What does she need to forgive herself for?" "For surviving when she could have given up. For losing her memories when everyone expects her to remember. For not being able to love you automatically just because you were married." Richard looked at his son with admiration. "When did you get so wise?" "I think it was today, when I realized our family is much more complicated than I thought." "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "Dad, can I ask you a hard question?" "Go ahead." "If Emily decides to leave, will you let her?" Richard remained silent for a long time. "Yes. This time, I'll let her choose. Even if it means losing her again. Especially because of that. I can't make the same mistake my parents did and try to control her life." The next morning, Emily woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. For a few seconds, she didn't know where she was. Then, the memories of the night before came rushing back like an avalanche. She got up and looked out the window. Richard was in the garden cutting white roses. There was something ritualistic about the gesture that intrigued her. She went downstairs and found Mrs. Wilson preparing breakfast. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected. Mrs. Wilson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What was my relationship with Richard like before what happened?" Mrs. Wilson stopped stirring the eggs and turned to Emily. "You were like two teenagers in love, always holding hands, always laughing. I've never seen two people so in sync." "Were we happy?" "You radiated happiness. Even when his parents started causing trouble, you stayed united." "Until when?" "Until the last week before you disappeared. That week you were different." Emily stepped closer, interested. "Different how?" "Quieter, worried. You'd spend hours staring out the window as if waiting for something bad to happen." "Did I say anything?" "Once you asked me if I thought love was enough to overcome any obstacle." "And what did you say?" "That true love always finds a way." Emily closed her eyes, trying to force a memory. "Was I afraid?" "Very, but you never said of what." At that moment, Richard came in through the back door, carrying a bouquet of white roses. "Good morning," he said hesitantly. "I thought you might like these in your room." Emily accepted the flowers, and as she touched them, another fleeting flash of familiarity came over her. "Thank you." "Emily, I thought maybe you'd like to walk around the property. See if you recognize anything." "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why?" "Because if I don't remember, you'll be disappointed. And if I do, it might be too painful." Richard nodded understandingly. "Then let's do something different. How about I show you New York as it is today? 30 years have changed the city a lot." Emily considered the offer. That would be interesting, but not as a nostalgic trip, as a discovery. "Deal." Michael appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "Morning. Do you two ever sleep?" "Not much," replied the father. "Emily, how are you feeling?" "Like someone who woke up in a different world." "In a way, that's exactly what happened," said Michael. "The world of 1994 was very different from the world of 2024. "How so?" "Well, now we have the internet, cell phones, social media, people communicate in completely different ways." Emily looked intrigued. "Cell phones?" Michael picked up his smartphone and showed it to her. She examined it with fascination. "This is a phone?" "It's a phone, computer, camera, television, all in one." Incredible. Richard watched the interaction between his son and Emily with a mix of tenderness and melancholy. It was obvious Emily felt more at ease with Michael than with him. "Dad, why don't you show Emily how to use the internet? Maybe she can look up amnesia, understand better what happened to her." "That's a good idea," Emily agreed. Richard led them to his office, where a modern computer occupied the main desk. Emily sat in the chair, clearly intimidated by the technology. "It's easier than it looks," Richard said, sitting beside her. When their arms accidentally touched, both felt a strange electricity. Emily moved slightly away. "Sorry." "No need to apologize." Richard showed her how to browse the internet. Emily was fascinated by the sheer amount of information available. "Can I look up anything?" "Anything." "Even about myself?" Richard hesitated. "Emily, maybe that's not a good idea. There might be news about your disappearance that I'd rather not see." "Exactly. Richard, I spent 30 years not knowing who I was. Now that I do, I won't hide from the consequences." She typed, "Emily Henderson missing New York, 1994. The results appeared immediately. The first link was from a newspaper at the time. "Young businessman's wife vanishes mysteriously." Emily clicked the link and read silently. Richard watched her face, trying to decipher her reactions. "The Henderson family offers a reward for information," Emily read aloud. "Richard Henderson, devastated by his wife's disappearance, hired a private security firm to find her." She looked at Richard. "You really looked for me?" "Tirelessly. For 5 years." "What made you stop?" "My parents. They convinced me you were dead and that I needed to move on." Emily kept reading. According to sources close to the family, Emily Henderson may have fled due to social pressure surrounding the marriage. She paused. Even back then, someone knew there was social pressure. Journalists always know more than they should. Emily clicked another link. Businessman remarries after 5 years. The article showed photos of Richard's wedding to Catherine. The groom looked serious, but not happy. "She's beautiful," Emily remarked, looking at the pictures of Catherine. "Emily? No, I mean it. She's beautiful and seems like a good person. It must have been hard for her to live in the shadow of a missing wife." Catherine always knew the situation. Knowing is one thing. Living with it is another. Emily closed the browser and turned to Richard. "I want to meet her." "Meet who?" "Catherine, your wife." "Emily, I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? She's been part of your life for 20 years. I can't just ignore that." "But she won't be back until next week." "Then I'll wait." Richard looked uncomfortable. "Emily, there's something you should know about Catherine." "What?" "She might not react well to your presence here." "Because of jealousy?" "Because of the threat you pose to the stability she's built." Emily stood up from the chair. "Richard, you brought me back into your life. Now you have to deal with the consequences of this. I didn't bring you back. Michael found you. But you chose to let me stay." "Because I love you." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Emily stopped abruptly. "You love a memory, not me." "It's the same person." "No, it's not. The Emily you loved was young, innocent, full of dreams. I'm a 53-year-old woman who spent 3 decades sleeping in shelters. To me, you're still the same." Emily stepped closer to him, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. "Then you're not seeing who I really am now." "Who are you now?" "Someone who learned not to trust easily. Someone who knows love isn't always enough. Someone who doesn't need saving anymore." Richard looked at her with a mix of admiration and sadness. "You've grown stronger." "I had to. The alternative was disappearing completely." Just then, the phone rang. Richard answered reluctantly. "Hello, Catherine? But you weren't supposed to be back until next—" "What? Today? But—" "All right, I'll be here." He hung up with a worried expression. "Catherine's coming back today. She cancelled her business trip." "Why?" "She didn't say, but she sounded different." Emily took a deep breath. "Then the time has come." "Emily, maybe it's best if you leave for a few hours. Let me explain the situation first. No, if I'm going to be part of your life again, she needs to meet me now." "But—" "Richard, stop trying to protect me. It's long past time for all the truths to come out." 2 hours later, Catherine Henderson arrived at the mansion. She was an elegant 45-year-old woman with perfectly styled brown hair and designer clothes. Her posture was proud, but there was something vulnerable in her eyes. She walked through the front door and froze when she saw Emily sitting in the living room. "Richard?" she called, not taking her eyes off Emily. Richard appeared quickly, followed by Michael. "Catherine, you're early." "Seems I arrived just in time," she replied, still staring at Emily. "Who is this woman?" "Catherine, this is Emily." "Emily who?" "Emily Henderson. My first wife." Catherine paled but kept her composure. "That's impossible. Emily Henderson died 30 years ago." "Clearly she didn't," Emily said, standing politely. Catherine studied her from head to toe. "Are you sure it's her?" "We are," Richard answered. "And where has she been all these years?" "It's a long story," Emily said. "But the short version is, I lost my memory and lived on the streets." Catherine let out a bitter laugh. "How convenient. The first wife reappears just when our marriage is going through a rough patch." "Our marriage is going through a rough patch?" Richard asked, surprised. "Richard, do you think I'm blind? I've lived 20 years with a man who never truly loved me." "Catherine—" "No, let me speak," she interrupted. "I always knew there was someone before me, someone you could never forget." Emily stepped in. "Catherine, I'm sorry my being here is causing—" "You're not sorry at all," Catherine snapped. "You came back to reclaim what you think is rightfully yours." "I didn't come back. I was brought." "By whom?" "By me," Michael said, joining the conversation. Catherine turned to her stepson. Michael? You brought her here? I found her passed out on the street during the storm. I couldn't leave her there. Yes, you could, and you should have. Catherine, Richard exclaimed, shocked by his wife's harshness. What, Richard? Did you expect me to be happy about this? Emily moved closer to Catherine. You have every right to be angry, but not at me, at him. What do you mean? I didn't choose to be here. I didn't choose to discover I had a life I don't remember. I didn't choose to disrupt your family. But you're enjoying this. No, I'm not. In fact, I'm considering leaving. Richard turned to Emily, alarmed. Leaving? To where? Anywhere that doesn't cause pain to innocent people. Catherine studied Emily with new attention. You really don't remember anything? Almost nothing. Just vague flashes that could be memories or imagination. And you feel nothing for Richard? Emily hesitated before answering. I feel familiarity. Like when you recognize a song but can't remember where you heard it. Catherine sank heavily onto the sofa. Do you know why I cancelled my trip? No, replied Richard, because I got an anonymous call. Someone told me my husband was sheltering a homeless woman in our home. Emily and Richard exchanged glances. Who called you? I don't know. It was an older woman's voice. She said I should come back immediately if I wanted to save my marriage. My mother, murmured Richard. Your mother knows Emily is here. We found out last night. She was the one who told us the truth about the disappearance. What truth? Richard told Catherine the whole story. When he finished, she was visibly shaken. My God, Richard, your parents did this to her. They did. Catherine looked at Emily with a different expression. And you lived on the streets all these years because of it? I did. You lost a child? I did. Catherine remained silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course. If your memories came back completely, would you try to rebuild your life with Richard? Emily looked at Richard, then at Michael, and finally at Catherine. I don't know. The person I was back then might have. But the person I am now, I'm not sure. Why? Because I've learned that sometimes it's better to start over than to try fixing something that was broken long ago. Catherine nodded slowly. I understand that. You do? Richard, can I speak to Emily alone? Catherine, I don't think... Please. Richard hesitated, but eventually agreed. He and Michael left the room, leaving the two women alone. Catherine stood and walked to the window. Emily, do you want to know the truth about my marriage to Richard? If you want to tell me. We met at a charity event. He was clearly suffering, lost. I was ending a troubled relationship and needed stability. Was it a marriage of convenience? At first, yes. But I fell in love with him over the years. And him? He respected me, admired me, was a good husband. But he never loved me the way he loved you. Emily moved closer to Catherine. That must have been very painful. It was, but it also gave me Michael. Not biologically, but emotionally. He's more my son than my stepson. Michael is an extraordinary young man. He is, and I don't want to lose him. Why would you? Catherine turned to face her. Because if you stay, if you two try to rebuild what you had, I'll become the intruder. The second choice. The wife who shouldn't exist. Emily fully grasped the situation. Catherine, I can promise you one thing. I didn't come here to destroy your life, but your presence already is. Then maybe I should leave. Where would you go? You have no one, nothing. I have myself, and at 53 that might be enough. Catherine studied her with growing admiration. You really have changed, haven't you? I have. The Emily Richard described to me was dependent, needed protection. You're strong. I had to be. And does that bother him? What? The fact that you don't need him anymore? Emily considered the question carefully. I think it does. He still sees me as the vulnerable young woman who needed saving. But that person doesn't exist anymore. And what if she came back? If your memories fully returned? I don't know. Maybe I'd have to choose between who I was and who I've become. Catherine sat back down. Emily, Can I propose something? What? Stay here for a week. Try to recover your memories, fully understand who you were. Then decide if you want that life back or if you'd rather start something new. And you? I'll use this week to decide whether I want to fight for a marriage that may never have been real, or if it's time for me to move on too. Emily was surprised by the offer. You'd do that? I would, but with one condition. What? During this week you can't make any final decisions about Richard, and he can't pressure you in any way. What if at the end of the week I decide I want to try rebuilding my marriage with him? Then I'll accept that I lost and bow out with dignity. And if I decide to leave, then maybe Richard and I can try to build something real without ghosts from the past. Emily held out her hand to Catherine. Deal. Catherine shook it. Deal. When Richard and Michael returned to the room, they found the two women sitting side by side, speaking quietly. Is everything all right? Richard asked, apprehensive. Better than we expected, Catherine replied. Richard, Emily is going to stay here for a week. Stay. To try to recover her memories and decide what she wants to do with her life. And then she'll decide whether she wants to rebuild the past or create a new future. Richard looked from one to the other, confused. And you, Catherine, what will you do during this week? I'll decide if I still want to be your wife. The silence that followed was broken by Michael. Can I give my opinion? Of course, said Emily. I think the three of you are the bravest people I've ever met. Why? Catherine asked. Because you're willing to risk everything for the truth, even if that truth might destroy what you've built. Emily smiled at Michael. Your wisdom continues to amaze me. It's just that sometimes those on the outside see things more clearly than those in the middle of it. And what do you see? Richard asked. I see three people who have hurt each other deeply over the years and now have the chance to heal those wounds for good. Even if it means more pain in the process. Especially because of that, sometimes you have to re-break a bone that healed wrong so it can mend properly. Catherine looked at Michael with pride. When did you become so wise? I think it was today, when I realized being an adult means making hard choices, even when they hurt. Emily stood up. Then it's decided. 1 week to find out who I really am. And how will we do that? Richard asked. By visiting places that were important to us, talking to people who knew us, trying to piece the story back together. Emily, Catherine said, there's something you need to know. What? Your birth family, your parents and siblings, they're still alive. Emily felt the ground shift beneath her again. How do you know that? Because when Richard married me, I wanted to know everything about you. I hired a private investigator. Catherine, Richard exclaimed, you never told me that. There were many things I never told you. Where are they? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Your parents moved to a small town after your disappearance. They never stopped looking for you. And my siblings? You have a younger sister, Melissa. She became a lawyer and dedicated her career to finding missing people. Emily leaned against the wall, struggling for air. My sister became a lawyer to search for missing people. Yes? She never accepted your disappearance. Where is she now? In New York. There's a law firm specialized in missing persons cases. Emily looked at Richard. Did you know about this? No. Catherine never told me. Why didn't you tell me? Richard asked his wife. Because you were finally moving on. I thought knowing about her family would only reopen old wounds. Emily sat down, trying to process everything. My family spent 30 years looking for me. They did. And my sister became a lawyer because of me. She did. Emily began to cry silently. So much suffering. So many people hurting because of me. Michael knelt beside her. Emily, none of what happened was your fault. But the consequences were real. My family fell apart. Richard suffered. You grew up in a broken home. Catherine lived in the shadow of a ghost. And now you have the chance to fix at least part of that, said Catherine. How? By reuniting with your family, giving them the peace they deserve. Emily looked at Catherine with gratitude. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? Because I realized That for me to truly be happy with Richard, he first needs to make peace with the past. And that will only happen if you find your place in the world. Even if that place is by his side. Even then. Richard stepped closer to the two women. Catherine, Don't say anything now, Richard. Let this week pass. Then we'll talk about us. But I need you to know that... I know. And that's why I'm doing this. Emily stood up, determined. I want to call my sister. Now? Richard asked. Now. 30 years has already been too long. Catherine grabbed her phone and searched for Melissa's number. Emily, are you sure? It might be too much of a shock for her. For me too, but it's a necessary shock. Catherine dialed the number and handed the phone to Emily. On the other end, a woman's voice answered. Attorney Melissa Cooper's office, good afternoon. Emily took a deep breath. Please, I'd like to speak with Attorney Melissa. It's about a personal matter. One moment, please. Emily waited, her heart pounding so loudly everyone in the room could hear it. This is Melissa Cooper. How can I help you? Melissa, Emily's voice trembled. My name is Emily. Silence on the other end. Emily who? Emily, your sister. The sound Melissa made wasn't quite a scream or a gasp, but something in between. Is this some kind of cruel joke? It's not, Melissa. It's me. Prove it. Emily closed her eyes, trying to find a memory that could convince her sister. I can't. I lost my memory. But you can ask me things only your sister would know. Where were you born? I don't know. What was our dog's name? I don't remember. Then how can I be sure that... Melissa, Emily interrupted. Did you become a lawyer to search for missing people? Another silence. How do you know that? Because I just found out. Just like I just found out you never stopped looking for me. Emily? Melissa's voice cracked. Is it really you? Yes. Where are you? Where have you been all these years? It's a long story. Can you come to the Hendersons' house? The Hendersons' house? You're with Richard? I am. Oh my God. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Melissa? Yes? Our parents, are they still alive? They are. Oh, Emily, they'll be so happy. The call dropped. Emily kept holding the phone, tears streaming down her face. How do you feel? Michael asked. Like I'm waking up from a very long dream. A good dream or a nightmare? I don't know yet. 20 minutes later, the mansion's gate opened to let in a car that screeched to a stop at the entrance. A 48-year-old woman rushed out of the vehicle and rang the doorbell insistently. Mrs. Wilson answered the door and came face to face with a younger version of Emily. The resemblance was unmistakable. You must be Melissa. Where is she? Where's my sister? Mrs. Wilson led her to the living room. When Melissa saw Emily, she stopped abruptly in the middle of the room. The two women studied each other in silence. Melissa was shorter than Emily, with brown hair and green eyes, but their bone structure was strikingly similar. Emily? Melissa murmured. Hi, Melissa. Melissa ran across the room and hugged Emily tightly. Both cried without caring who was watching. I knew you were alive, Melissa sobbed. I always knew. I'm so sorry, Melissa. I'm sorry I disappeared. It wasn't your fault. I always knew something had happened to you. They pulled apart, but Melissa kept her hands on Emily's shoulders. Let me look at you. You're so thin. And this grey hair. 30 years do that to a person. Where have you been? What happened? Emily told the whole story to Melissa, who listened with growing horror. His parents did this to you, Melissa asked, glaring at Richard. Melissa, I didn't know, he said defensively. How could you not know? They were your parents. I was young, I was desperate. I believed what they told me. Melissa turned back to Emily. Emily, you need to sue this family. What they did is a crime. Melissa, that was 30 years ago. I just want to move on. But they destroyed your life. Our family fell apart because of it. How are our parents? Melissa sat down, still visibly shaken. Dad never fully recovered. He blames himself for not protecting you better. Why? Because he knew the Henderson family didn't like you, but he thought your love would overcome it. Emily looked at Richard sadly. And our mother? Mom developed severe depression after you disappeared. She got a little better over the years, but she was never the same. Are they still married? Yes. Bound together by grief and the hope of finding you. Emily stood abruptly. I need to see them. Emily, maybe I should prepare them first. No, they've waited 30 years. I won't make them wait another day. Melissa grabbed her phone. I'll call them. Where do they live? In Boston. If we leave now, we can be there in 2 hours. Richard stepped forward. Emily, do you want me to come with you? Emily hesitated. I don't know if that's a good idea. They might still resent you. Understandable, Catherine said. Maybe it's best if you go with just Melissa. Can I come? Michael asked. Emily smiled at him. Smiled. I'd love for you to come. I want my family to meet the young man who saved me. Melissa looked at Michael curiously. You're Richard's son? Yes. And you're the one who found Emily? I am. Melissa walked up to Michael and hugged him. Thank you. Thank you for bringing my sister back. I just did what any decent person would do. You're wrong. Most people would have walked right by. Emily, Melissa, and Michael left the mansion, leaving Richard and Catherine alone. The silence between them was heavy. How are you feeling? Catherine asked. Confused, hopeful, terrified. Terrified why? Because now that she's back, I might lose her again. Richard, you lost her a long time ago. The question now is whether you can build something new. Do you think it's possible? I think it depends on whether you can accept that you're not the same people you were 30 years ago. Richard sank onto the couch. Catherine, I need to apologize to you. Why? For using you as her replacement all these years. You didn't use me. We used each other. You needed someone to help you forget. I needed stability and social status. That's very sad. It is. But it doesn't mean we didn't build something meaningful over the years. We built? We did. Mutual respect, affection, partnership. It wasn't the great love you had with Emily, but it was real in its own way. Richard Henderson looked at his wife with newfound admiration. When did you become so wise? When I realized I was losing you and that I couldn't fight a ghost. Emily isn't a ghost anymore. No, and that makes everything more complicated, but also more honest. At that moment, Mrs. Wilson entered the room. Mr. Richard, may I speak with you privately? Of course, Mrs. Wilson. Actually, said Catherine, I want to hear this too. If we're going to resolve this, everyone needs to be honest. Mrs. Wilson hesitated but finally agreed. There's something I never told you. About the night Mrs. Emily disappeared. Richard leaned forward. What? I saw when the men came for her. What do you mean? It was almost 2 in the morning. I was awake because my room is on the staff floor and I heard noise in the garden. And? I saw 2 men forcing Mrs. Emily into a car. She was fighting, trying to scream. My God, Mrs. Wilson, why didn't you ever tell me? Because the next day your parents called me into the library and said if I spoke a word about that night, I'd be fired without a reference. And you accepted that? Mrs. Wilson began to cry. Mr. Richard, I had 5 children to raise. I needed this job. But you saw Emily being kidnapped and said nothing. I tried. The next day, when you were desperate, searching for her, I tried to speak, but your parents were always nearby, watching me. Catherine moved closer to Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson, there's still time to make this right. You can give a statement to the police. Still, after all these years. Kidnapping doesn't expire, said Richard. But Mrs. Wilson, the men who did this, one of them is still alive. How do you know? Because I see him now and then on the street. He works at a gas station nearby. Richard and Catherine exchanged shocked looks. Mrs. Wilson, are you absolutely sure? Yes, he's a hard man to forget. He has a large scar on his face. We have to tell Emily, said Catherine. No, said Richard. First, we need to confirm if Mrs. Wilson is right. If she is, then we'll tell Emily. Why protect her? Because she's suffered enough. If it's true, she deserves to know, but only after we're certain. Meanwhile, on the road to Boston, Emily, Melissa, and Michael Henderson traveled in relative silence. Melissa drove, Emily stared out the window, and Michael watched the interaction between the two. "Emily," Melissa finally said, "I need to tell you what happened to our family after you disappeared." "Go on." "Dad sold the auto shop and used all the money to hire private detectives. When the money ran out, he searched the streets himself, looking for you." "And Mom?" "Mom stopped leaving the house. She'd sit by the window waiting for you to come back. It took 5 years for her to agree to leave New York." Emily closed her eyes, weighed down by guilt. "Do they blame me? Why? You were the victim. But I was the one who married Richard against their wishes. Emily, you were in love, and you were an adult. You had the right to choose. A choice that brought terrible consequences for everyone." Michael leaned forward from the back seat. "Emily, can I say something?" "Of course." "You can't carry the guilt for other people's actions. My grandparents chose to do what they did. You were just the victim." "Michael is right," Melissa agreed. "And Emily, there's something else you need to know about our family." "What?" "After you disappeared, Dad and Mom became volunteers at an organization that helps families of missing persons." "Really?" "For the past 20 years, they've helped dozens of families find their loved ones." Emily began to cry. "They turned their pain into something meaningful." "Exactly. And when they see you today, they won't feel anger or guilt. They'll feel gratitude." "Gratitude? For finally being able to hug the daughter they never stopped loving." Emily's parents' house was in a modest neighborhood in Boston. It was small but very well kept, with a garden full of flowers in front. Melissa parked, but no one got out of the car right away. "Emily, are you ready?" asked Melissa. "I don't know if anyone can ever be ready for a moment like this. Do you want me to go in first and explain the situation?" "No. I want them to see me." They got out of the car and walked to the door. Melissa rang the bell, and seconds later a woman's voice was heard. "Who is it?" "It's me, Mom. Melissa." "Melissa? What a surprise." "Hold on." The door opened, revealing a 70-year-old woman with completely white hair, but eyes still bright and alert. When she saw Emily, she stopped breathing. "Emily?" she murmured, almost inaudibly. "Hi, Mom." Susan Cooper stood frozen for a few seconds, then reached out with trembling hands to touch her daughter's face. "Is this real? Are you real?" "I'm real, Mom." Susan hugged Emily with desperate strength, as if afraid she might disappear again. "My daughter, my dear daughter, you're back." "I'm back, Mom." "Robert," Susan shouted. "Robert, come here, quick." A 75-year-old man appeared in the living room leaning on a cane. When he saw Emily, the cane slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. "Emily!" "Hi, Dad." Robert Cooper approached slowly, as if afraid she might be a mirage. Where have you been, my daughter?" "It's a long story, Dad. We have time, we have all the time in the world." They sat in the modest living room, decorated with family photos that included many of Emily as a young girl. Michael watched everything with emotion, feeling privileged to witness this reunion. Emily told her story again, watching the expressions of horror and sadness alternate on her parents' faces. "Those Hendersons," Robert said with restrained anger. "They stole you from us." "Dad, there's no point holding on to resentment now." "How can I not? They destroyed our family. And now the family is together again," Susan interrupted. "That's what matters." Robert looked at Michael. "And you're his son." "I am. And I deeply regret what my grandparents did to Emily." "Your grandparents?" "Robert," Emily said, "Michael isn't to blame for what happened. In fact, he saved me." "How?" "He found me passed out on the street and took me home. If it weren't for him, I'd still be out there." Robert studied Michael carefully. "You look like him, like Richard when he was young." "People say that, but you have something he didn't." "What?" "Character." Michael was visibly moved by the comment. "Thank you, Mr. Cooper." Susan turned to Emily. "Emily, do you still love Richard?" "Mom, I don't even know if I remember what love is." What do you mean? 30 years on the streets teach you that survival is more important than feelings. But now you don't have to just survive anymore. I know, and that's terrifying. Why? Because when all you care about is survival, you don't have to think about happiness. Now that survival is guaranteed, I have to decide what I want from life. Robert leaned forward. And what do you want? Peace. After 30 years of uncertainty, I just want peace. And where do you think you'll find that peace? Emily looked out the window of the small living room, watching children playing in the street. I don't know yet. Maybe by going back to the past. Maybe by building a new future. Emily, said Melissa, can I suggest something? Of course. Why don't you stay here with Mum and Dad for a few days, away from all the tension at the Henderson mansion? Melissa is right, agreed Susan. You need time to think without pressure from anyone. Emily considered the idea, but I promised I'd stay at the mansion for a week to try to recover my memories. The most important memories are here, said Robert, touching his heart, with your real family. Michael stood up. Emily, if you want to stay here, I completely understand. Michael, you don't have to go home alone. It's fine. My father and Catherine need time alone too. Emily stood and hugged Michael. Thank you for everything. You'd do the same for me. How can you be so sure? Because I know your heart, and it's a good one. After Michael left, Emily was alone with her original family for the first time in 30 years. The feeling was strange, familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Did you really never lose hope of finding me? Never, Susan answered firmly. We always knew you were alive. How could you be so sure? Maternal intuition, Susan smiled, and because we found people who had seen you over the years. What do you mean? Once a year, we'd travel to different cities. We'd show your photo, ask if anyone had seen you. And you found people who recognized me? A few. A nun in Miami Beach said you stayed at a shelter there for a few months, 15 years ago. Emily focused, trying to remember. Miami Beach? Yes. I think I vaguely remember a church. A nurse in Hartford said you worked in a community kitchen for a while. I worked in kitchens to get food. And a bus driver said you traveled often between cities, always alone. I moved around a lot. I was afraid to stay in one place too long. Afraid of what? Emily hesitated. I can't explain it. It was like something bad might find me if I stopped. Robert and Susan exchanged a meaningful look. Emily, Robert said gently, do you remember anything about the night you disappeared? Fragments, men forcing me into a car, a terrible pain in my head. Then, the hospital. Anything else? A feeling that something awful had happened, but I couldn't remember what. Susan held her daughter's hand. Emily, we want you to know that no matter what you decide about your future, you'll always have a place here. Even if I go back to Richard? Even then, we're your family no matter what. Emily began to cry again. I missed you so much without even knowing who you were. What do you mean? All these years I had vague dreams about people who loved me. I never knew it was you. And now you do. And now I have to decide what to do with that. Melissa sat beside Emily. Emily, can I tell you about my life? Please. I graduated from law school at 25, specialized in missing persons. I was married once, but it didn't work out. Why? Because my husband said I loved my missing sister more than him. That's terrible. No, it's not. He was right. My whole life was about finding you. And now that you have, now I can finally live my own life. Emily looked at her sister with guilt. Melissa, you sacrificed your happiness for me. No. I found my purpose helping other families. Through our family's pain, I eased the pain of others. How many people have you helped find? 46 so far. 46 families reunited because of you. Because of us. Because it was thinking of you that gave me the strength to keep going through every difficult case. Emily hugged her sister. You're amazing, Melissa. We're a family of survivors. They talked late into the night. Emily slept in the room her parents had kept untouched for 30 years, with her teenage belongings still there. As she looked at the photos on the wall, fragments of memory began to return. She remembered painting those comic strips, listening to music on that old radio, dreaming about the future in that bed. But the strongest memories were emotional. The feeling of being loved unconditionally, of having a place in the world, of belonging to something greater than herself. In the morning, Emily woke to the smell of coffee and homemade bread. In the kitchen, she found her mother preparing a special breakfast. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years." "Is it good to be home?" Emily considered the question. "It's confusing to be home, because now I have two possible homes." "The Hendersons' house isn't your home, Emily. It's just where you lived for 2 years. But that's where Richard is. And does that matter to you?" "I don't know. When I look at him, I see a stranger who claims to have loved me. But when I look at you all, I feel something real, even if I don't remember everything." Susan sat beside her daughter. "Emily, can I give you some advice?" "Please. Don't make any decision based on what others expect of you. Make it based on what will make you happy." "What if I don't know what would make me happy?" "Then try things. You have time to figure it out. But people are waiting for a decision. People can wait. You've waited 30 years to find out who you are. You deserve the time you need to decide who you want to be." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Michael. "Emily, how are you?" "Good. Better than I expected." "That's great. Emily, I need to tell you something important." "What?" "Mrs. Wilson made a revelation yesterday. She saw you being kidnapped the night you disappeared." Emily felt the ground shift beneath her again. "What do you mean?" Michael recounted the entire story Mrs. Wilson had revealed. "One of the men is still alive?" Emily asked, disbelieving. "It seems so. My father wants to investigate before telling you, but I thought you had the right to know immediately." "Where is this man?" "Working at a gas station." "Emily, maybe it's better if you don't." "Michael, after 30 years, I have the right to look into the eyes of the person who destroyed my life." "Emily, it could be dangerous. More dangerous than the 30 years I've already lived." "Do you want me to go with you?" "I do." "Then we'll go this afternoon. But Emily, promise me you won't do anything impulsive." "I promise." After hanging up, Emily told her family what she had learned. "You have to press charges against these men," Robert said indignantly. "Dad, that was 30 years ago." "Crimes don't expire, Emily. They need to pay for what they did." "And more importantly," Melissa added, "they may have done this to other people." Emily hadn't considered that possibility. "You think?" "Emily, men who agree to kidnap an innocent woman for money have probably done it before." "My God. That's why you need to report them. Not just for you, but for all the other possible victims." Emily nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll talk to this man today and then we'll go to the police." "We're coming with you," Susan said. "Mum, it's not necessary." "Yes, it is. We're a family, and families face hardships together." That afternoon, Emily, Melissa, Robert, and Susan headed back to New York. Michael met them at the gas station Mrs. Wilson had identified. It was a simple place on a busy avenue. Michael spotted the man immediately. It was impossible to miss the scar cutting across half his face. "That's him," Michael said quietly. Emily watched the man for a few minutes. He appeared to be around 60 years old, thin with graying hair. He didn't seem particularly threatening. "I'm going to talk to him," said Emily. "Emily, are you sure?" asked Melissa. "I am." Emily approached the pump where the man was working. "Excuse me." The man looked up and froze when he saw Emily. His face turned drastically pale. "No, it can't be." "Oh, it can. I'm Emily Henderson." The man quickly glanced around, as if searching for an escape route. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You kidnapped me 30 years ago." "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken." "I'm not mistaken at all. I remember your face. And this scar." The man nervously touched the scar. "Are you sure you're not wrong?" "I'm sure. And now I want to know why." The man looked at Emily and Michael's family, watching from a distance. "I can't talk here. Then where can you? If you really are who you say you are, meet me at the bar on the corner at 8 tonight, alone. I'm not going alone. Then I won't say anything. Emily weighed her options. Fine. But if you try to run, I won't run. I've carried this guilt for 30 years. Emily returned to the group and told them about the meeting. You're not going alone, Robert said firmly. Dad, he'll only talk if I'm alone. Then we won't let him talk, Melissa said. We'll go straight to the police. Melissa, I want to hear what he has to say. I need to understand exactly what happened. Emily, Michael said, can I suggest a compromise? What? You meet him, but we stay close by in the car. If anything goes wrong, we'll be there. What if he notices you're there? He'll only notice if he wants to. If he's just there to talk, he won't care. Emily agreed to the plan. At 8 that night, she entered the bar while the others waited in the car parked on the street. The man was already there, sitting at a table in the back drinking a beer. When Emily approached, he stood up respectfully. You actually came. I did. Now talk. First, I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. But you did. It was an accident. You tried to jump from the moving car because I was being kidnapped. I know, it was wrong. Everything was wrong. Who ordered you to do it? Old man Henderson, your husband's father. How much did he pay you? $10,000. It was a lot of money back then. Enough for you to sell your soul. The man lowered his head. I'd been unemployed for months. My wife was pregnant. I needed the money. And that justifies destroying my life? It doesn't justify anything. I know that now. Where did you take me? To an abandoned house outside Boston. The order was to keep you there until you agreed to leave the city. And when I refused, old man Henderson was furious, said we had to do something more drastic. What? He wanted us to make it look like you died in an accident. Emily felt a chill. He wanted you to kill me? Not exactly. He wanted us to fake your death. But my partner, he said it'd be easier to just do it for real. And you agreed? No, that's why we took you to the hospital. When you hit your head trying to escape, I said it was a sign that we had to stop. You left me at the hospital and disappeared. We did. But before that, old man Henderson paid us the rest of the money and told us to leave town. And you left? I did. I went to the countryside, got married, tried to forget. I only came back to New York 5 years ago. And your partner? Died 10 years ago. Cancer. Emily took a deep breath. Do you regret it? Every single day of my life. Do you have children? I did. I lost a son because of what you did. The man squeezed his eyes shut. My God. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. They didn't care about the consequences. What will you do now? I'm going to the police. I know. And I'll turn myself in too. Emily was surprised. Why? Because I've carried this burden for too long. I want to tell everything I know about what old man Henderson ordered us to do. Even knowing you could go to jail? Even so. Maybe then I'll finally sleep in peace for the first time in 30 years. Emily stood up. What's your name? Frank. Frank Miller. Frank, thank you for telling me the truth. Mrs. Emily, may I ask you something? Go ahead. Can you ever forgive me? Emily studied him for a long moment. Frank, forgiveness is something you earn. You took the first step by telling the truth. Now you need to do the rest. The rest? Help the police find out if there are other victims. Tell them everything you know about the Henderson family's crimes. I'll do that. Then maybe one day I can forgive you. Emily left the bar and returned to the car where her family waited anxiously. How did it go? Asked Melissa. He told me everything and offered to testify. He's turning himself in? Asked Michael, surprised. Yes. He said he can't carry this weight anymore. What now? Now we go to the police. And then I'll confront Richard. Confront him? He deserves to know his father tried to fake my death. On the way to the station, Emily called Richard. Richard, I need to talk to you. Emily, where are you? I was worried when you didn't come back. I'm fine. But I found out something you need to know. What? Your father didn't just want me gone, he wanted me dead. Silence on the other end. Emily, what are you saying? I'm going to the police now. After that, I'll come tell you everything. Emily, wait. But she had already hung up. At the station, Emily gave a detailed statement. Frank arrived shortly after and confirmed the entire story. The detective in charge was shocked by the revelation. Mrs. Emily, this is very serious. Kidnapping, attempted murder, forgery. What about the statute of limitations? For crimes this severe, there isn't one. We can investigate everything. Even with the mastermind dead? Even then. And if we find other victims, the family could face civil charges. When Emily finally returned to the Henderson mansion, it was past midnight. Richard was waiting in the living room, visibly shaken. Emily, tell me everything. She recounted her entire conversation with Frank. Richard listened in silence, his face growing paler. My father wanted to kill you. Yes. I didn't know he was capable of that. Now you do. Richard stood and walked to the window. Emily, I don't know how to apologize for something so monstrous. You're not to blame for what your father did. Yes, I am, because I believed his version, because I didn't investigate enough. You were young and grieving. That's no excuse. Emily stepped closer to him. Richard, look at me. He turned, his eyes wet. What your father did was terrible, but you can't carry the guilt for his actions. How can I not? If I'd been stronger, if I'd stood up to my parents. You couldn't have stopped anything. Your father was determined to erase me from your life. And he did. For 30 years, but not forever. Richard looked at her intently. Emily, after everything we've learned, is there still any chance for us? I don't know. But I know we can't build a future on guilt or trying to fix the past. Then what can we build it on? On who we are now. On what we truly feel today. And what do you feel now? Emily took a deep breath. Confusion. Gratitude that you took me in. But not love. At least not yet. Yet. Richard, maybe we can fall in love again. But it would be a new love, not a continuation of the old one. I'd accept that. What about Catherine? Catherine deserves someone who loves her completely. She knows that. Where is she? In her room. She said she'd rather give us space to talk. Emily went upstairs and knocked on Catherine's door. Come in, said the voice from inside. Catherine was sitting on the bed, reading a book. She closed it when Emily entered. How did it go with your family? Revealing. In every way. Emily told Catherine about the discovery of the kidnapper. My God, Emily, Richard's father really tried to kill you. He did. That changes everything. Does it? Richard will be devastated when he fully processes what his father did. He already is. And that means he'll need emotional support to get through it. Emily sat in the armchair beside the bed. Catherine, do you still love Richard? I do. Not in the same romantic, intense way you loved him, but I do. Then why are you willing to walk away? Because sometimes loving someone means letting them go. Even if it means being alone? Better alone than in a lie. Emily admired Catherine's dignity. You're an incredible woman. So are you, and maybe that's why Richard fell in love with both of us. Catherine, can I ask you something? Of course. If I decide to leave, would you try to reconnect with him? Honestly? I don't know. 20 years of marriage leave marks. Some good, others not so much. What kind of bad marks? The constant feeling of competing with a memory. The awareness that I was never his first choice. But that could change if I left for good. It could, or it might be too late. Emily stood up. Catherine, I want you to know I respect you deeply. Why? For how you're handling this. Many women would react with anger or jealousy. I felt anger and jealousy too, but I realized those feelings would only make me unhappy. And now? Now I just want all of us to find peace. Even if that peace doesn't include Richard for you. Even then, Emily left Catherine and went to the blue room. She needed time to process everything that had happened. She sat at the dressing table and looked at her reflection. The woman in the mirror seemed different from the one who had arrived a few days earlier. There was more life in her eyes, more purpose in her posture. A soft knock interrupted her. "Come in." It was Michael. "How are you?" "Exhausted, emotionally and physically. I can imagine it's been quite a day." "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Always." "What do you think I should do?" "About what?" "About your father, about Catherine, about my future." Michael sat in the armchair, thoughtful. "Emily, can I tell you what I've observed these past few days?" "Please." "I've seen 3 people who hurt each other deeply trying to do what they thought was right. And I've seen that sometimes the right thing isn't trying to fix the past, but having the courage to create something new. You think I shouldn't try to rebuild my marriage with your father? I think you should do what makes your heart happy, no matter what others expect. And if my heart doesn't know what it wants, then give it time to figure it out." Emily smiled at Michael. "When did you grow up so much? I guess watching all of you handle such complex situations made me realize being an adult is about making hard decisions, not being sure they're right. That's wisdom many adults take years to learn. Maybe it's because you all showed me how to face life with honesty." Emily was moved. "Michael, no matter what I decide about my future, I want you to know meeting you has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me." "For me too. You showed me family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to care for each other." "That's exactly it. Emily, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "I always felt our family was incomplete. Now I understand why. Because an important part was missing. Not just you. The truth was missing." Emily nodded. "And now that we have the truth, now we can decide what to do with it." The next day, Emily woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in a long time. She went downstairs for breakfast and found Richard and Catherine sitting at the table talking quietly. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," they replied in unison. "What were you talking about?" "About us," answered Catherine. "About our marriage." "And did you reach any conclusion?" "We did," said Richard. "We're separating." Emily felt a mix of surprise and relief. "Why?" "Because we realized our marriage was based on the wrong reasons," Catherine explained. "He needed someone to help him forget. I needed financial and social stability. And now? Now he needs to figure out who he is, without the shadow of guilt," Catherine continued. "And I need to figure out who I am without living in someone else's shadow. That's very mature of you." "It's necessary," said Richard. "Emily, I want you to know this isn't about you. Isn't it? It's about honesty. Catherine deserves real love, not a convenient arrangement. And you, what do you deserve?" "You deserve the chance to find out if you can still fall in love for real," Catherine replied. Emily sat at the table. "And what if that love isn't for me?" "Then let it be for someone else," Richard said. "But let it be real." "Richard, are you sure about this?" "I am. These past few days made me realize I've been living in limbo for the last 20 years. It's not fair to me, to Catherine, or to you." Michael walked into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "Good morning, dysfunctional family." "Family in transition," Catherine corrected, smiling. "What do you mean?" Richard explained the decision he and Catherine had made. "And where do I fit into all this?" Michael asked. "You stay with both of us," Catherine said. "You'll always be my son, no matter what happens between me and your father." "And Emily?" Michael asked, looking at her. "Emily," she said, "needs time to decide what she wants." "How much time?" "I don't know, maybe weeks, maybe months. And during that time, I'll get to know the person I've become. I'll rebuild my relationship with my family. I'll figure out who I am when I'm not just surviving." Richard leaned forward. "And after? Then I'll see if there's room in my life for a new love." "New love?" "Richard, the love we had died 30 years ago. If we fall in love again, it'll be something completely new." "And are you willing to try?" "I'm willing to see what happens. But no pressure, no rush, no expectations based on the past. Catherine stood up. Then it's decided. Richard and I will start the separation process. Emily will stay with her family for a while. And all of us will figure out who we are when we're not trying to be who we thought we should be. And Michael? Emily asked. Michael, the young man said, will keep being the bridge between all of you. Because you're my family, all of you. Even if the situation is complicated. Especially because it's complicated. Simple families are overrated. Emily smiled. Michael, would you like to come with me to Boston? Spend a few days with my parents? I'd love to. And Richard, Emily turned to him, when I'm ready, would you like to officially meet my family? I'd love to, but only when you're comfortable. And Catherine, would you like to meet them too? Catherine looked surprised. Me? You? You're part of this strange family we've created. And my parents would like to meet the woman who took care of Michael all these years. It would be an honor. Richard Henderson looked around the table. You all know our situation is completely crazy, right? The best situation we've ever been in, said Emily. Why? Because for the first time in a long time, we're all being honest about what we want and how we feel. And is that enough? It's a start. 2 months later, Emily was in her parents' kitchen in Boston preparing dinner. Michael helped her while sharing his plans to study psychology. I think I want to help families in complicated situations, he said. Like ours. Like ours. I've discovered I have a knack for it. You really do. The doorbell rang. Emily went to answer it and found Richard at the door, holding a simple bouquet of flowers. Hi, he said shyly. Hi, come in. Over the past 2 months, they had spoken regularly, but this was their first in-person meeting since Emily had moved to Boston. How are you? Better, stronger, more myself. You look different. I am different. These 2 months helped me discover who I am when I'm not just reacting to circumstances. And who are you? Someone who enjoys cooking, who loves talking to people, who has her own opinions, who doesn't need to be saved. You've always been those things. Maybe. But now I know it. They sat in the living room. Robert and Susan were visiting Melissa, so they had the house to themselves. Richard, how are you handling the separation? Better than I expected. Catherine and I have found we can be friends. Good friends, even. That's rare. It is, but it helps that neither of us is trying to force something that isn't there. And how's the legal process going with your father's inheritance? Complicated, but the attorney thinks we can secure a fair settlement for you. I don't want money, Richard. I know, but you deserve it. Emily studied him. He seemed calmer, less burdened. You look different too. I am. These 2 months have been like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for 20 years. And how's Michael? Happy. I think he likes this new family arrangement. It's a unique arrangement. It is, but it works. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Emily, Richard finally said. Yes. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you feel anything for me now? Emily considered her answer carefully. I feel affection, gratitude, a strange connection I can't fully explain, but not love? Not romantic love, not yet. Yet. Richard, I think we need to be friends first. Get to know who we are now. See if we actually like the people we've become. And then? Then we'll see if there's a foundation for something more. How long could that take? As long as it needs to. Are you willing to wait? I'm willing to try being your friend. If it leads to something more, great. If not, at least we'll have an honest friendship. Emily smiled. That sounds perfect to me. Perfect? Richard, for the first time in 30 years, I'm not afraid of the future. Why? Because I'm not trying to recreate the past or control what happens. I'm just living in the present. And how is the present? Good. Full of possibilities. Richard stood up. Emily, can I give you a friendly hug? You may. They embraced, and Emily felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace, not passion, not drama, not desperation, just peace. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" "For giving me time, for not trying to force anything. Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that sometimes starting over is better than trying to fix what's broken." When Richard left, Emily sat in her mother's garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky pink and orange. Michael joined her. "How was it?" "Good. Natural." "Are you two going to try dating?" "Maybe. Someday. But no rush." "And you're okay with that?" "I am. For the first time in my life, I'm not chasing after something or running from something. I'm just being." "And how does it feel to just be?" Emily smiled. "It's freeing." "Emily, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I think you taught us something really important." "What?" "That sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. And that families can change. They don't have to stay the same." "Exactly. Our family now includes you, my dad, Catherine, your parents, Melissa. It's a little crazy, but it works. It works because we all choose to be in it, and because we all decided to be honest." Emily looked up at the starry sky beginning to appear. "Michael, do you regret bringing me home that night?" "Not at all, do you?" "Not at all." It was the start of everything falling into place. Even with all the pain it caused, the pain was already there, just hidden. At least now it had a purpose. What purpose? It taught us we're stronger than we thought, and that the truth, even when it hurts, is always better than a lie. A year later, Emily was organizing her first photography exhibition. During her months in Boston, she had discovered a talent for capturing intimate moments of people and families. The exhibition was called Reunions and featured families who had come back together after long separations. Richard, Catherine, and Michael arrived together for the opening. Catherine brought her new boyfriend, a literature professor who made her laugh genuinely. "How do you feel?" Richard asked, admiring one of the photographs. "Nervous, excited, fulfilled." "The photos are beautiful." "Thank you." "It was therapy for me, photographing these families." "Why?" "Because it made me realize every family has its own unique way of healing." Catherine approached them, radiant. "Emily, congratulations. The exhibition is wonderful." "Thank you, Catherine. How are you?" "Happy, truly happy." Emily looked at the man with Catherine. He was a few years older, with graying hair and kind eyes. "This is William," Catherine said. "William, this is Emily, the person who completely changed our lives." "For the better, I hope," William said, extending his hand. "Definitely for the better," Emily confirmed. Michael appeared carrying a bouquet of flowers. "For the family's artist," he said, handing them to Emily. "Family's artist?" "Of course, you're not just part of the family. You're the official artist now." Emily laughed, hugging Michael. "And you, how's psychology school?" "Amazing. I'm interning at a clinic that helps families in crisis." "And you like it?" "I love it. It's like all our crazy experiences prepared me for this." Melissa arrived with Robert and Susan. Emily's parents, now in their early 70s, looked younger and more vibrant than when she had reunited with them. "My artist daughter," Susan said, kissing Emily. "We're so proud." "Thank you for being here." "We wouldn't miss it," Robert said. "By the way, we have some news." "What news?" "Melissa decided to open a branch of her law office here in Boston. She's moving closer to us." Emily looked at her sister, surprised. "Really?" "Really. I'm tired of New York, and I want to spend more time with family." "But your work?" "My work can be done anywhere, and Boston has plenty of families who need my services." Emily hugged Melissa, emotional. "That's wonderful. And there's more," Melissa said. "I met someone." "You did?" "A retired detective who works on missing persons cases. We met during a consultation and, well, we ended up realizing we have a lot in common." "Melissa, that's amazing." "He'll be here soon. I want you all to meet James." Richard Henderson watched the family interaction with a nostalgic smile. "What are you thinking about?" asked Emily, moving closer to him. About how our lives have changed this past year. For the better? Without a doubt. You know, Emily, there's something I want to tell you. What? I'm also seeing someone. Emily felt a strange pang in her chest, but realized it wasn't jealousy. It was more like curiosity. Tell me. She's a psychologist I met during the therapy I started. Therapy. To process everything with my parents, with you, with Catherine, it was essential. And you met her there? No, she wasn't my therapist. We met at a conference on family trauma. She works with domestic violence survivors. What's she like? Smart, strong, independent. She makes me laugh. And most importantly, she has nothing to do with our past. Emily smiled genuinely. I'm happy for you. You really are? I am. You know why? Why? Because it means we've both managed to move on in a healthy way. Richard looked at her tenderly. Emily, can I ask you something? Always. Do you regret that we didn't try to rekindle our relationship? Emily considered the question carefully. No, I think we did the right thing. Why? Because what we had 30 years ago was beautiful, but it belonged to that time, to those people. Trying to recreate it would be dishonest to who we've become. And now? What are we now? Friends, family, people who share a complex history and genuinely care about each other. Is that enough? It's more than enough. It's rare. At that moment, an elegant woman in her 40s approached them. She had dark hair tied in a bun and lively eyes. Richard, she said, smiling. Sarah, Richard lit up. Emily, this is Sarah, the psychologist I told you about. Sarah, this is Emily. Sarah extended her hand warmly. Finally meeting you. Richard talks about you a lot. I hope good things, said Emily, immediately liking the woman. Only good things. He holds you in high regard. And I him. You make a lovely couple. Sarah smiled, intertwining her fingers with Richard's. We're happy. And you? Richard mentioned you're focused on your art career. I am. After so many years just surviving, I can finally dedicate myself to something fulfilling. Is there someone special in your life? Emily hesitated for a moment. I'm seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, but promising. That's wonderful. Who is he? A retired history professor who lives in Boston. We met at a lecture on memory and trauma. Sounds interesting. He is. He lost his wife 5 years ago and is also relearning how to live. We have that in common, the experience of rebuilding after significant losses. Richard smiled. I'm happy for you, Emily. Thank you. And you too. Any plans for the future? Sarah and Richard exchanged a glance. We're thinking of moving to a smaller town, said Sarah. Richard wants to leave the corporate world, and I want to open a private practice. Which town? We're still deciding. Maybe Boston. Emily laughed. Boston is becoming the meeting point for our unconventional family. Would you mind? Asked Richard. Not at all. It'd be wonderful to have everyone nearby. Michael joined the group, carrying a soda. What are you all talking about? Your dad is thinking of moving to Boston, Emily explained. Really? Michael seemed excited. That'd be amazing. Why? Asked Sarah. Because then we could have our Sunday lunches together. Sunday lunches? It's a tradition we started, Emily explained. Every Sunday, part of our family gathers for lunch. Sometimes at my parents' house, sometimes at Melissa's. And who joins? Asked Sarah, curious. It depends on the Sunday, said Michael. But usually me, Emily, my biological and adoptive parents, my grandparents, Aunt Melissa, and everyone's partners. Sounds complicated. It is, Emily laughed. But it's our kind of complicated. And does it work? Perfectly, said Richard. It's one of the best things we've created this past year. Melissa approached the group, accompanied by a tall man with graying hair. Everyone, I'd like you to meet James. James greeted everyone warmly. When introduced to Emily, he held her hand a moment longer. Emily, it's an honor to meet you. Melissa told me your story. Your resilience is remarkable. Thank you, and thank you for making my sister happy. She makes me happy too. Melissa moved closer to Emily. Emily, can I talk to you privately for a minute? Of course. They stepped aside to a quieter corner of the gallery. What is it? Asked Emily. I want to tell you something I haven't shared with anyone yet. What? James proposed to me. Emily's eyes widened. Melissa, that's wonderful. I know, but I'm nervous. Why? Because it'd be my first marriage, and after seeing everything you've been through, Melissa, look at me. Melissa lifted her gaze. Is James like Richard? No, of course not. Then stop comparing. Every relationship is unique, and from what I can see, you two genuinely love each other. We do. Then what's the problem? I'm afraid it's too late to start a family. Do you want children? I do. And James does too. But I'm 48. Melissa, women have children at that age these days, and if it doesn't happen naturally, there are other options. Do you think I should say yes? I think you should follow your heart. Are you happy with him? Very. Does he respect you? Completely. Do you share the same vision for the future? We do. Then why hesitate? Melissa hugged Emily. Thank you. I needed to hear that from you. Why from me? Because you're the bravest person I know. If you think I should take the leap, then I will. When will you give him your answer? Tonight he's waiting. And what will it be? Yes, definitely yes. They returned to the group, which now included Robert and Susan. What were you two talking about? Asked Susan. About some news, Melissa said with a mysterious smile. James leaned in and whispered something to her. She nodded and turned to everyone. Everyone, James and I have an announcement. All eyes turned to them, expectant. We're getting married. The room erupted in joy. Hugs, congratulations, happy tears. Emily watched, her heart full. When's the wedding? Asked Catherine. We're thinking December, said James. A simple ceremony, just for family. And where? Asked Robert. At the church where our parents married, Melissa replied, glancing at Emily. If Emily doesn't mind the memories. Melissa, it'd be an honor, said Emily. Our parents stayed together over 50 years. It's a good omen. And will you be my maid of honor? Melissa asked. Of course, but I've never done this before. Well, I've never been a bride, Melissa laughed. We'll learn together. Richard joined his sisters. Can I make a suggestion? Of course, said Melissa. What if we make the wedding a big family reunion? Invite everyone who's part of our crazy family. Everyone who? Asked James. Emily, Melissa, Robert, Susan, me, Sarah, Michael, Catherine, William. Our whole family constellation. That would be wonderful, said Melissa. James, what do you think? I think it'd be perfect. I've always wanted a big family, and now I'll have one. Emily felt her eyes well up. You know this is very unusual, right? An ex-husband and ex-wife attending their sister-in-law's wedding. We're not an ordinary family, said Michael, and that's why we work. Michael is right, agreed Catherine. We've created something new, something that works for us. William, who had been quietly observing the family dynamics, stepped closer. Can I make an observation as an outsider? Of course, said Emily. You're an example of how families can reinvent themselves. You're not stuck in traditional molds, but have built something that meets everyone's needs. It's true, said Sarah. As a psychologist, I can say it's rare to see such a complex situation resolved so healthily. It wasn't easy, admitted Richard. It took a lot of honesty and willingness to put everyone's well-being above individual egos. And time, added Emily. So much time to heal wounds and rebuild trust. Susan approached the group. Kids, can I say something? Of course, Mom, said Emily. Robert and I are so proud of you, all of you. Why? Asked Michael. Because you turned tragedy into an opportunity for growth, because you didn't let bitterness win, because you chose love over resentment. Robert joined his wife. And because you gave us the chance to see our family grow in ways we never imagined. How so? Asked Melissa. When Emily disappeared, we thought our family was destroyed. Now we have more family than we ever dreamed of." "It's true," said Emily, looking around. "We have 3 generations, multiple couples, different stories, but all united by choice and affection." "And it's going to grow even more," said Melissa, smiling. "How so?" asked James. "Well, we're thinking about having kids." Another burst of joy. More hugs, more plans, more happiness. Emily stepped back slightly and watched the scene. There was her family, biological, adoptive, chosen. Each person had come into her life differently, but all were important. Michael approached her. "What are you thinking about? How strange life is. 2 years ago I was homeless with no memory. Today I'm surrounded by more love than I ever thought possible. And how does that feel? Grateful. Deeply grateful." "Emily, can I ask you a personal question?" "Always. Do you still miss what you had with my dad?" Emily considered the question honestly. "I miss the intensity of that young love, but I wouldn't change anything that happened." "Why?" "Because that love, while real, was immature, based on passion and the idea that love conquers all. And now I know true love isn't about overcoming obstacles. It's about growing together, supporting each other, building something solid." "And do you have that with the professor you're seeing?" "I'm finding out, but the difference is I'm not desperate for it. If it happens, great. If not, I still have a rich, meaningful life." "That's very mature. 30 years of solitude teaches you that you have to be happy with yourself first." "Emily, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. You taught me not to fear complicated situations." "How so?" "I'm dating a girl whose parents had a very traumatic divorce. She's afraid to introduce any boyfriend to her family because they always take sides. And how are you handling it?" "By showing her families can be messy and still functional. Our family is living proof." Emily smiled. "She wants to meet the crazy family?" "She does, and I can't wait to introduce her." "When?" "At Aunt Melissa's wedding?" "Perfect. It'll be her baptism by fire. She'll love it, especially you." "Why?" "Because you're proof that it's possible to start over, no matter what happened in the past." Emily looked back at the gathered group. Catherine was showing photos on her phone to Sarah. Richard was chatting animatedly with James about politics. Melissa was planning wedding details with her parents. William watched everything with an amused smile. "Michael, do you know the best part of all this?" "What?" "No one is pretending. We've all been through real pain, made hard choices, but we're here being true to ourselves. It's rare, isn't it? Very rare. Most families have secrets, buried resentments, people who tolerate each other out of obligation. And us. We choose each other, consciously, every day." Melissa approached them. "Emily, everyone wants to go out to dinner together to celebrate. Are you coming?" "Of course. Where are we going?" "That pizza place you always go to on Sundays." "Perfect. Let me just tell the gallery staff I'm leaving." Emily walked over to the exhibition organizer. "Kevin, I'm stepping out for a bit. Can I leave the exhibit with you?" "Of course, Emily. By the way, congratulations. We've already sold 3 photographs." "Really?" "Really. And there are people interested in commissioning custom work." "That's amazing. You have real talent, Emily, and your personal story adds a layer of authenticity to your photos that's very moving." "Thank you, Kevin." Emily returned to the group, beaming. "Everyone, we sold 3 photos." "Emily, that's wonderful," exclaimed Susan. "It means your artistic career is really taking off," said Richard. "I'm so proud of you," said Catherine. "Thank you. All of you were essential in getting me here." "How so?" asked Sarah. "You gave me the emotional stability to dedicate myself to art. When you're always worried about survival, you don't have creative energy." "And now?" asked William. "Now I can dream big. I'm planning a second exhibit about new beginnings." "What kind of new beginnings?" asked James. "People who completely changed their lives after 50, who reinvented themselves." "Like you," said Melissa. "Like all of us, really. Everyone here has reinvented their life in some way." "It's true," agreed Catherine. "I learned I can be happy without being married." "I learned I can love again without trying to recreate the past," said Richard. "I learned family is something you build, Not just something you're born into, said Michael. And I learned it's never too late to find love, said Melissa. What about you two? Emily asked Robert and Susan. What did you learn? That pain can turn into strength, said Susan. And that losing a daughter doesn't mean losing her forever, Robert added. Emily felt the tears returning. You all know I love you, right? We love you too, said Michael, starting a group hug. For a moment, they all embraced in a warm tangle of arms and laughter. Everyone, said James when they separated, can I just say I feel privileged to be part of this family? Welcome to the club, said William, laughing. It's a very special club, added Sarah. It is, agreed Emily. It's a club of people who chose to heal instead of growing bitter, who chose to build instead of destroy. And who chose to love instead of being afraid, Richard finished. Melissa checked her watch. Everyone, the pizza place closes in 2 hours. Shall we go? Let's, agreed Emily. But first I want to take a photo of all of us. Here at the exhibit? Asked Michael. Here at the exhibit, to mark this moment. Kevin, the organizer, offered to take the photo. The group stood in front of the wall displaying Emily's photographs. Smile, said Kevin. Wait, said Emily. I want to say one thing first. Everyone looked at her expectantly. 2 years ago, I was lost, without identity, without family, without a future. Today, I'm surrounded by love, pursuing my passion, building my future. And, asked Melissa, and that was only possible because you gave me the chance to discover who I really am. You didn't try to force me back into who I was before, but you supported me as I figured out who I wanted to be. Emily, began Richard, let me finish. You taught me that family isn't about blood or legal contracts. It's about choosing to be present in each other's lives. It's about supporting without judging. It's about loving without trying to control. And you taught us it's never too late to start over, said Catherine. And that courage isn't the absence of fear, but doing what's right even when afraid, added Michael. And that forgiveness frees the one who forgives, not just the one forgiven, said Richard. Now we can take the photo, said Emily, smiling through her tears. Wait, shouted a familiar voice. Everyone turned. It was Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper, accompanied by a young man. Mrs. Wilson, exclaimed Emily, what are you doing here? I wasn't going to miss my girls' exhibition, said Mrs. Wilson, hugging Emily. And I brought my grandson to meet you. Your grandson? This is Ryan. He's studying photography in college. Ryan, a young man around 20, looked at Emily with admiration. Mrs. Emily, it's an honor to meet you. My grandmother always talks about you. I hope good things, Emily laughed. Only good things. She says you're the strongest person she knows. Your grandmother is the strong one. She took care of our family for decades. Mrs. Wilson grew emotional. Mrs. Emily, can I ask for something? Anything. Can I be in the family photo? Emily looked at the others, who nodded in agreement. Mrs. Wilson, you've always been part of this family. Can Ryan join too? Of course. They rearranged to include Mrs. Wilson and Ryan. Kevin got ready to take the photo again. Now we're set, said Emily. A photo of our complete family. Complete? Asked Melissa. Well, we're missing Emily's boyfriend and Michael's girlfriend, said Catherine, laughing. And Melissa and James's future children, added Richard. And whoever else joins us, said Emily. Because this family is always growing. Always open to those who need it, agreed Michael. As every real family should be, said Robert. Ready? Asked Kevin. Ready, they all chorused. The camera flash captured the moment. 10 people of different ages, stories, and backgrounds, united by something stronger than blood or social convention. United by choice, by love, by mutual respect. After the photo, as they walked to the pizzeria, Emily lingered behind, watching her group. Melissa had linked arms with James. Robert and Susan walked hand in hand. Richard and Sarah chatted animatedly with William and Catherine. Michael showed something on his phone to Ryan. Mrs. Wilson watched it all with a maternal smile. Emily smiled, feeling deep peace settle in her heart. Not the peace of someone who's had an easy life, but the peace of someone who's learned to turn pain into growth, loss into opportunity, fear into courage. Michael approached her. Why are you smiling? because I finally understood something. What? That it doesn't matter where you're born or the family you start with. What matters is the family you choose to build. And are you happy with the family we've built? Happier than I ever thought possible. Emily, yes? Thank you for coming into our lives. Thank you for finding me that night. It wasn't a coincidence, was it? What? Me finding you. Mrs. Wilson being awake to see your kidnapping. Catherine investigating your family. Melissa becoming a missing persons attorney. None of that was a coincidence. Emily considered Michael's words. Maybe not. Maybe some things are meant to happen, even if they take 30 years. Do you believe in fate? I believe in second chances, and third ones, and as many as it takes. And that some people come into our lives to teach us something important, and that family is something you choose every day. They caught up with the group at the entrance of the pizzeria. The large table was reserved, as always happened, for Sunday dinners. Emily, said Melissa once everyone was seated, may I make a toast? Of course. Melissa stood up, raising her glass of soda. I'd like to toast to my sister, who taught us it's never too late to come home, that family is about love, not genetics, and that the happiest endings are the ones we build with our own hands. Cheers! Everyone shouted, raising their glasses. Emily stood up too. And I'd like to toast to all of you, who gave me a family when I didn't even know who I was, who supported me while I found myself, and who showed me that true love is the kind that sets us free to be who we really are. Cheers, they all repeated. As they talked, laughed, and planned for the future, Emily looked around the table and felt deep gratitude. Not for what she had lost, but for what she had gained. Not for the life she might have had, but for the life she was living. Because sometimes the best stories begin when you think everything is over. Sometimes the strongest families are the ones you choose. And sometimes getting lost is the first step to truly finding yourself. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Do you believe Emily made the right decisions? What kind of family is yours, traditional or chosen? Share your honest opinion in the comments. If the story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories about overcoming challenges and love.